All right, folks, this is Rabble Rouse and Rich Bergeron.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Tornado Tony Benical.
And Psychic Tom Paget. Is crystal ball ready for 2023?
All right, Tom. We're going to need your crystal ball this week because I've started betting on the fights. Last week was my first week on DraftKings.
Oh, really?
Betting on the fights. And I did horribly. Horribly. I think I spent $140 and I won 20. So, I obviously did not bet the right way. But the good thing is, I spent about $100 on the football games and I won 260. So, I have football figured out.
That's good.
I have football figured out. And the one big win for me was actually Daniel Jones. And I do this thing. I've seen actually a couple postings on Facebook of people trying to sell their tips for live betting. So I started checking out the live bets, and so far the three biggest bets I've won were from live betting. And what I do is I basically wait for half of it to already be won. And I waited for Daniel Jones to rush for 50 yards. And which happened very early in the game, and then he just had to pass for 300 yards, and I think it was one other thing. So of course, at the end of the game, it was very close to 300 yards. He ended up with 301 yards. So a $10 bet made me $104 just on that lone parlay, which was already half won. The other one was it was a 49ers game right before the playoffs. And it was, I think, 49ers versus Raiders. And it was Devontae Adams had to have like 120 reception yards. And Brandon Ayuk had to have 100 reception yards. And the same, I don't know if it was the same parlay or a different one. I think it might have been a different one. But also the guy from the 49ers there, McCaffrey, had to have like 100 yards rushing and a touchdown or something like that. And all three of them paid off in that game. So those were my first big wins, gambling. But yeah, it's just, you just bet small. Like $2-3 bets that turn into $100 wins. And so you don't waste a lot of money learning. And you also learn which ones never pay off. Like, they get you with ones like 10 kicking points. Guy has to get both teams have to get 10 kicking points out of their kickers. That's one that I fell for a couple times, but it's really,
that would be hard.
It is really hard sometimes. And the other one was like every game's kickoff has to be a touchback. So that's how they get you, as they would say.
So even if they give you an all-time kicker with squib, you're screwed.
Yeah. Basically. What are the other ones? Oh, both running backs getting 100 yards or more. That one never pays off. Never. But the ones that, if you're smart about, and you look at the history of the players over the course of the year, you can pretty much figure out who's going to get 100 yards and a touchdown, or who's going to get what they call an anytime touchdown. So those are the ones I've been playing and doing well on. And I kicked myself last week because what I usually do for the FanDuel is I'll look up, DFS lineup picks on Google, and I'll check out a couple articles and who they suggest. So this last week, the Cowboys are playing. And, of course, I love Tom Brady, so I got to make all these bets on Tom Brady, which fucking sucked. But the other ones paid off, so I made up for it. But the one that on the Cowboys I knew I had to make was Dak Prescott getting a rushing touchdown, because he had something like 29 rushing touchdowns during the year. So there was a couple lineups that said that, yeah, he's probably going to get a rushing touchdown. So I made that bet. That paid off pretty good. It was like $30-40. And then the one I missed was Dalton Schultz. I read one particular article that said that he should be considered for MVP in some of your lineups because he is underappreciated tight end, and he's one of the best tight ends in the league. So I was like, whatever, I don't think he's that good. 2 touchdowns later. You know? And I don't know
Yeah,
what
he had a
odds.
good game.
I don't know what odds he had, but probably good ones. So this week I figured out what I did last week. There was like round by round bets that you could make, like a TKO in round number 1, a submission in round number 1 would have different odds. So I tried doing like a schematic that would let me bet almost every high odd result. And the first fight on the card, I really analyzed. I wrote everything down. I came up with the numbers, and I figured, all right, if I bet on 11 outcomes out of the possible 13, that's a good enough hedge on my bet. I don't think that the guy's going to get a knockout in the first round. One guy getting a knockout in the first round, the guy who won in the first round, of course, screwed up all those bets. So either he was conscious of somebody from the sports book paid him. I don't know. The other guy had like all submissions too. So I mean, if I was going to bet on him, I should have just bet submissions. But I bet every possible outcome except decision and knockout in the first round for the guy who won. And what does the guy do? He knocks him out in the first round. So that screwed up like $30 worth of bets. So that was a bust. And then I tried to make up for my shitty bets because I only won one. I think it was Roman Kopylov. He got a knockout, and I predicted that correctly. But I tried to put it all into the main event, which on the one UFC betting show that I watched this week, they said you probably shouldn't bet on the main events. No, it was a YouTube clip that I saw. He said you shouldn't bet on the main events, you know, because especially the way I was betting on each round's decision, you know, I tried to cover the spread, and the decision one for Sean Strickland was the one that I should have made, because he's just famous for just standing up and doing the pitter patter. And I mean, he won the fight. He looked pretty decent, but especially on short notice. But I should have known it was going to go to decision, and I picked every other option but decision. So I wasted another $40, and I still was able to win on the football somehow. So this week I realized there's a whole other category. You can just bet on a general result. You know, whether it's going to be knockout, submission, or decision, and for which fighter. So I only put $60 down on the fight so far. And yeah, I think it's going to be a little bit better this week for me, hopefully. But yeah, like there was one fight lineup that I was looking at the bets for, and like the guy had never been never got a knockout or been stopped in the first round. So I was like, there's no reason to bet that. You know, sure enough, that's the one bet I should have made. Crazy. And Dan Ige, that would have been a big payoff. I think he got a knockout in the third round. Great fight there. And it was really didn't even look like that bad of a punch. It was one of them short hooks. And just knocked the guy flat out. But let's start with that. Strickland got his unanimous decision win over Nassourdine Imavov. He actually, I mean, he didn't look bad, but I was screaming at the freaking computer trying to tell him to push it. Because what he does, he paces himself really well. He's pretty decently prepared as far as cardio goes. Obviously, Nassourdine Imavov is coming up from a lower weight to fight light heavyweight. So, I mean, he's leaner. He's a little bit more cut, but Strickland is just a beast. I mean, he's very good on the feet. So I should have known not to even bother with submissions, but the submission payouts were like really high. So I figured, hey, fluke, why not? I think the fourth round submission was like 10,000 odds or something, plus 10,000. Crazy. So, no, it was 9,000, plus 9,000. Fourth round submission. So that was the one I was really praying for. But I figured he might have a chance to knock him out. And he did have him kind of stunned a couple times. But then he would just back off. And, you know, all this shit with James Krause, our former guest, getting wrapped up in trouble because of the investigation going on with the guy who hurt his leg, and all the late bets came in on him to lose. That was kind of heavy on my mind, but at the same time, I'm thinking about the Dana White connection, and who knows if he's not still feeding information to the mob and setting fights up to end a particular way. You never know. So, like the way the fight ended, the way that Sean could have stopped it a couple times and didn't, made me wonder, is somebody telling him what has to happen? Maybe he'll get extra money, a locker room bonus, as they used to call it, if he makes it go the distance. Who knows? I would not put anything past Dana White. And also, I found out that this Power Slap Fighting League, the Fertittas are invested in that. I just found that out yesterday. I had no idea. It's not been published anywhere that I know of, but somebody posted something about it, and I was just like, holy shit, that makes sense. But anyway, Sean Strickland, if you're going to bet on him, 9 times out of 10, if he's not getting knocked out, he's going to decision. He's just really a lot of straight punches, not a lot of kicks at all, maybe leg kick here and there, but just nothing that, not even a head kick, I don't think, not one head kick was thrown in that fight. So it's just chances of knocking people out at his level right now, where he's main eventing in situations like this. If you're going to bet on him, probably don't go for submission, number one. But knockout is probably highly unlikely. Unless he fights some pushover. But Dan Ija, it was the second round. He got his knockout over Damon Jackson. And then Roman Kopylov, like I said, he was the only one I bet properly on. Although I did hedge my bets with a couple for Soriano, who ended up losing. So they might have broken even on that exchange. I stayed away from the Raquel Pennington fight. She won by split decision over Ketlin Vieira, which was probably low odds anyway. And then Nurmagomedov, like I always said, you certain people with certain names you don't ever bet against, and he has an incredible record on top of that. But I thought he would win by submission. I did not even contemplate a knockout, especially not in the first round. And that was the one.
Neither did I.
That was the one.
That was brutal. And I'll tell you what, that guy he's put that whole division on notice.
Yeah.
I mean, anyone there has got to be thinking awful hard about fighting him.
And as you always say, Tom, his opponent was no cheap date, Raoni Barcelos.
Yeah.
He was a tough guy, but this did not end well. And then another one I stayed away from, Javid Basharat beating Matheus Mendonca. That was a unanimous decision. And I knew this one was going to end in knockout. I just didn't know which round, so I kind of avoided this one. Abdul Razak Al Hassan against Claudio Ribeiro. They both had a few losses in their last few fights, so I just really couldn't pick a winner there. I just called it a toss-up, and Razak Al Hassan just turned on the juice in the second half, or the second round, and 28 seconds in, he got the knockout. Very impressive. For that fourth fight of the night, Matheus Rebecki beating Nick Fiore by unanimous decision. I had Nick all the way in that one, so that was another bad one. Alan Nascimento over Carlos Hernandez. I did stay away from that one. That was a rear naked choke finish in round number 1 for Nascimento. And then Dan Argueta over Nick Aguirre. I had Aguirre. He lost by unanimous decision. I don't think I bet on decision anyway, so I would have lost that either way. But Charles Johnson, he was my worst pick, not picking him to win first round TKO. And he only needed less than 30 seconds to get out of that first round, Jimmy Flick, and he failed me. And he had like 14 out of 16 wins were by submission, so I mean, I pretty much figured if he was going to win, there would have been submission, but I figured wrong. Because he did not win, and it was not by submission. So we'll go to boxing for a minute, and then we'll go back to this weekend's UFC card. There's nothing really going on in the other leagues until PFL comes back at the end of the month here. With their new addition, I don't know if he's going to fight on that card, but their new addition, Jake Paul, we talked a little bit about last time we had the show. Well, we got quite a lot of boxing to talk about. I did bet on some boxing, too. I was careful. I picked just one fight on a card that there was an upset on, but I did not pick the right upset. So, yeah. The stuff that I'm supposed to be the best at.
Fights being woefully unentertaining?
Yeah. The stuff I'm supposed to be best at, analyzing, I was the worst at so far. Hopefully that changes this weekend. But these are actually fights I watched up until the Gervonta Davis fight, January 7th. And I think I had Hector Luis Garcia in the main event. I picked him to win. And then the other one I had was Karen Chukadzian, hoping that he might get the upset. But he looked horrible. He got beaten by Jaron Ennis from post to post. And I think he landed like one or two hard shots to the head that might have rattled Ennis for like a half second. But otherwise, he just looked like shit. So I was upset about that one. And I fell asleep during the Gervonta Davis fight because that was so one-sided. And Hector got knocked out. So, not good picks, but I just picked him just for the hell of it because of the odds. I knew it was going to take a miracle. But the one I should have picked for the upset was Rashidi Ellis, who was undefeated at 24-0. But Royman Villa, 25-1 going in, pulled off a massive upset by, he was 2 knockdowns in the final round. And he ended up getting a majority decision over Ellis. And Ellis is more of like a flashy jab, speed puncher, jabs a lot, tries to throw speedy combinations together. Not quite as fast as Meldrick Taylor, but he reminds me a little bit of that type of style that Meldrick had. And he just got too overconfident at the end of the fight, and he let Royman get right back in it. And boy, that was an exciting one to watch. Even my girlfriend got into it. She was like not really a big fan of me watching fights all night. When that started to happen, she was like, "Wow, this guy's getting his butt kicked." And then, of course, I did not bet against Demetrius Andrade. He got his unanimous decision over Demon Nicholson. I didn't watch that one, but from the looks of it, it was pretty one-sided. So then we go to last week, and the big one was a heavyweight fight. And I wish I bet on this one because I bet you the F.A. Ajagba by decision bet would have been high odds because of his knockout power and his
you know what,
size in general.
Going back to the fights the previous week, I didn't get the pay-per-view with the Gervonta Davis fight and Boots Ennis. I know they said Ennis didn't look great, but he won every round against a really tough opponent. So like I said, I can't give a lot of feedback on that one. Davis, won by stoppage. But with the fights last week, I watched the 2 heavyweight fights. I switched off from football and unfortunately missed that great Jacksonville comeback because I was watching 2 snore fests. With the F.A. Jagba fight, they were saying like, okay, both of the fighters out there, Ajagba and Guido from Italy, they were both undefeated fighters. They were both favored, but they were both fighting substitutes that were live underdogs. So go to the Ajagba fight. His opponent did not throw punches. Now, I've watched a lot of boxing over the years, and you can, use great defense to win a fight. Look at guys like Pernell Whitaker, Willie Pep, Floyd Mayweather, guys that used great defense to win a fight. But you know what the constant still was in there? They punched. So you might use a defense to make a guy miss, but you still got to throw counter punches. So
who's the only guy to ever win a fight with defense, or a round with defense only, Tony? I know you know this answer.
Well, Willie Pep one
There you
round,
go.
without throwing a punch.
Yes, that's the one.
And I'll tell you, if you want to go back and watch one, and it was later in his career, Vinny Paz, he was fighting a guy named Joseph Chiwanuka, and Joseph was, climbing up the ranks, and he had an upset loss at the Blue Horizon to Thomas Tate. My dad was actually working corners that night. And shortly after that, I was a crossroads fight between Vinny, who was still, contender and was trying to fight his way back towards a title shot, and Chiwanuka, who was trying to, get back on track. And as they're fighting, I forget what round it was, but Vinny came out. And for the first 2 minutes of the round, he was using a lot of movement, a lot of feints, but he wasn't throwing punches. And I'm watching it. Now, granted, I'm in rose-colored glasses, so I'm a Vinny fan. But I was like, I remember turning to my dad saying, Dad, I think Vinny's winning this round. My dad's like, Tony, he hasn't thrown a punch yet. I'm like, yeah, but he's making this guy look so bad. The guy's like tripping over his own feet. My dad's like, but you got to punch a guy to win the round. And we're like, how can you give a guy a round when he's not throwing a punch? And I'm like, Dad, because he's what would you call, what do they always say, ring generalship. They would always say that.
Who's leading the dance? Who's leading the
exactly.
dance?
Harold Letterman, was it Harold Letterman? Yeah, Harold Letterman would always say that on HBO. His qualities for judging: clean and effective punching, aggression, ring generalship, and then defense. And so, but this guy was not throwing punches back. He was sitting there, and he was, just his hands. He had the earmuffs on, but he wasn't countering. And when the decision came, and I was dozing off by this time, and it was 96-94, and I think it was a fact of the matter, it was a Jogba just used his jab and landed more punches in a dreadfully dull fight. Then the other fight was with Jonathan Rice, who is a guy out there that's always a live underdog. He has his 2 wins over what was the guy's name? Coffey, John Coffey, I think. The Stephen King movie. I forget Coffey. The army guy, and so they bring Jonathan Rice back in here, and he's fighting Guido from Italy, undefeated silver medalist in the Olympics. And it was a slow-paced fight, and I'm like, man, this fight's not that great, but starting to pick up. And Coffey lands this right hand, and when you see it, you just see blood fly. And Benji Estevez, who's a very good referee, called it a headbutt. And they were going to go to the cards. Yeah. And that Rice was going to lose. And thankfully, because they were on an Indian ground, and it was, sovereign ground, they were saying, okay, we can go to the replay. And when they went to the replay, they're like, it's clearly a punch. You have to do the right thing.
It was nice to see that, wasn't it? For once,
yes, it was.
Wasn't it nice to see that? Because sometimes it's just either no replay or if the replay is not confirming the action stands. I've seen that happen. This is nice to see. I mean, I didn't care who won, but it was nice to see.
Yeah. Yeah, and then there's one heavyweight fight that's coming up this weekend that I put a bet on because I just thought if anybody was gonna pull off the underdog win, even though on paper he doesn't even look like an underdog, he's actually ranked higher. It's this fight card from the United Kingdom, which I saw some real good exchanges from the press conference today. It's pretty funny. Liam Smith kind of reminds me a little of Conor McGregor. He comes from the United Kingdom there. He's got a sort of similar accent, not quite as Irish, obviously, but I think he's from Liverpool or something like that. But Liam Smith was really getting on Chris Eubank Jr., who's fighting in the main event there. No title on the line, but Eubank Jr. is 32-2 at middleweight. Smith is 32-3 with 1 draw. So obviously very good on paper matchup. Smith is ranked number 5, Eubank number 2 in the world. And it's going to be on DAZN, which is actually going under. another story we got to talk about a little bit. They're not doing so well financially. It just came out this last week. But this card is going forward, and Eubank Jr. was accused of being gay by Liam Smith because he's never seen him with a woman, and he said nobody's ever seen Chris Eubank Jr. with a woman. And rather than outright deny it or confirm it, as Liam Smith was trying to get him to do, Eubank was just trying to stay out of the personal stuff, but he said, if we're going to get personal, what about all this cheating on your wife that you do? So, oh man, talk about a zinger. You got him there. So yeah, I don't know what that has to do with anything about fighting, but obviously the trash talk is at a heavy level between those two, so it's, taking a personal edge. But we'll see how the fight goes down. I didn't really know if I should pick either guy in that one. It's going to be a close fight. And then we have the one for all the titles, even though they're kind of a little bit obscure titles, not really world titles. Ikao Esuman, number 28 in the world at welterweight, fighting number 21 Chris Kongo, who's 14-1. Esuman is 18-0. This one is for the BBBFC British welterweight title, the Commonwealth Boxing Council welterweight title, the IBF European welterweight title, and the WBC International Silver welterweight title. So that's another one I did not bet on, but this is the big heavyweight one. Number 14 versus number 11. It's actually not heavyweight, it's cruiserweight. I should have said that, but there is a heavyweight fight on the same card. We'll get to it in a minute. But Richard Riakporé, I did not bet on my namesake, even though he's 15-0. I bet on the guy that's he's got the better resume, I would say, as far as tough opponents. Krzysztof Głowski, 32-3 at cruiserweight, and years ago he was like in one of those fights where he was just getting destroyed, and he came back in the 12th round and got a fantastic knockout. It was 11th or 12th round, I think. But I picked him both to win and to win by knockout. It's two different bets. So hopefully he pulls through for me. And his box rec profile starts out with my lucky number, 47. So that's another reason to go for him. But yeah, what was it? And he's fought some pretty big names. His only losses are another 15-0 guy, Lawrence Okoli. That was back in 2021. That was the last time he lost. Before that, it was Maris Bradis at 25-1, and then before that, it was the 9-0 Alexander Usyk, who we know is pretty good today. But he's beaten guys with pretty incredible records, like 42-2 Maxim Vlasov back in 2018, beat him by unanimous decision. Steve Cunningham, former guest of ours. Marco Huck knocked him out. It was the 11th round. That's the one I'm thinking of. Marco Huck back in 2015. The 11th round knockout. And Glowacki was down in the 6th round. And Huck went down twice in round 11. That's my Rain Man mind in action. Remember that off the top of my head. I don't do that often with boxing, but that was one. So the other big fight on that Manchester Arena card on Saturday, Joseph Parker versus Jack Massey. And this is another one where Parker has a couple more losses, but also has the better resume as far as opposition. Parker comes in at 30-3, having had fights against all the big names in the heavyweight division, and Jack Massey comes in at 20-1, but the last few fights in particular just aren't really against either big names or people with really good records. If you look at his box rec record, his last opponent was 19-12 last year, last April. And he did win by knockout in the second round, and he does have a knockout streak of 3 fights, but nowhere near the level of competition that Joseph Parker has faced. So I don't know what the odds are on that one. I haven't looked at it, but if I was going to bet on somebody in that fight, it would be Joseph. I think he takes that one. And the last guy that, ironically, that Jack Massey lost to was the guy I'm hoping my other dude beats, Richard Riakporhe. Lost by unanimous decision and was actually knocked down in the 10th round of that fight. That was back in 2019. So yeah. And before that fight, he fought a guy and only was able to win on points against a guy who was 2-11 for a record. So I don't know if he has much of a chance in this one. Well, anybody has a chance. I should have that clip from Dumb and Dumber. So you're saying there's a chance?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so UFC 283. I have analyzed this one, but I still might need your crystal ball, Tom. Glover Teixeira versus Jamal Hill. I think that's the hardest one on this whole card to pick.
Yeah.
Glover has the experience. Jamal has the power. Almost all of his wins by knockout. Glover has a pretty well-rounded game and rarely gets knocked out himself. He has 3 of his 8 losses by knockout, just 1 submission loss, and the rest are decisions. And he's got a pretty mixed result as far as his wins. He's only gone to decision for a win 5 times out of 33 wins, and 18 of his wins were knockouts and 10 were submissions. And of course, he was on quite the win streak right up until losing at the last second due to a big mistake against Jerry Prochaska. I think he was winning. I don't know. Could have been a close decision. But anyway, in that win streak, he beat Jan Blachowicz, Thiago Santos, Anthony Smith, Nikita Krylov, Ion Cutelaba, and Carl Roberson. All UFC contests there. And only one of them was by decision. So I've got him heavy on knockouts and submission wins for this one. But I do think I hedged my bets with decisions for this particular fight. As far as Jamal Hill, I think I got him just by knockout. I don't think he's going to get a submission. He doesn't really have a lot of experience with that.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to want to be on the ground.
And he's only
and you have to wonder, what about the home court advantage, or will it be a disadvantage for all these Brazilian fighters?
That too. I think Glover will be at a big advantage. Just having the home crowd and not having to travel, all that stuff, I think is going to play a big factor. I don't know what the elevation is either.
Lives in Connecticut. He's not really.
Is the elevation in Brazil an issue? I know it's always an issue when the NFL plays in Mexico. But I don't know how much of the elevation above sea level or anything like that is going to have a factor.
No, I don't think it is. And this is in Rio. Remember, that's right by the ocean, sea level.
Oh, all right.
So I wouldn't think that would
well, maybe the heat
be that big of a deal.
I mean, Jamal Hill is from Michigan, so maybe the heat will have a factor. But he's only got 1 loss by knockout. So also 7 wins by knockout and 4 decisions but he's only got 12 fights, period. Even though most of them have been.
Yeah, and the problem is it's hard to get a handle on Hill. And I don't know what his mental makeup is. I mean, because, when Stipe won the title going to Brazil to fight Purdue, everyone was, oh, God, you're going to Brazil. I mean, what chance do you have? But Stipe, with his personality, it was just like he's punching a time clock. And he didn't let the crowd bother him, and you've seen the results. But I don't know about Hill. I just don't know enough about him. So, in that sense, I think it will favor Glover.
Well, the two comparable fighters that I can see on his record that you could say are close to share as far as experience would be Paul Craig, who he lost by knockout to, when Paul Craig is a submission artist. It's kind of weird in itself. And then Thiago Santos, who he actually beat by knockout in the 4th round, late in the fight. So that was obviously a headlining fight. That was his last fight. He beat Thiago Santos. But I think Glover Teixeira is a notch above Thiago Santos. And if it took Jamal Hill that long to take out Thiago, I don't think he has any possibility of taking out Glover with the limited amount of decisions that he's had for his losses. So we'll see, but yeah, I definitely think I'm going to win some money on that fight. And then your co-main event.
Yeah, I'm confident about that one. Now, that's a nightmare.
Yeah. The co-main event
is wow.
Davison Figueiredo and Brandon Moreno. Now, I should have stayed away from this one because it could go either way, but I just got a glimpse at Davison Figueiredo's picture 2 days out from weigh-in, and he doesn't look like he has even a half ounce to lose if he had to. I don't know what his weight situation is, but he is literally skin and bones right now, and looks very depleted. And Brandon Moreno, I saw some pictures of him at both the press conference and his picture time, which he was making jokes about. He's actually trending on Twitter because of it. And he looks great. He looks very confident, and I don't think he's having an issue with his weight cut. So I'm favoring him. And the only time Davison's done phenomenally well in those fights is when he won by decision. So the bets are all heavily, weighted towar's a finish. And Brandon, I think, is more likely to get that finish.
Yeah, and I think Moreno seems to be pretty well together mentally. He seems very at ease and yet very focused. So,
and I also read
slight edge to him, but wow, it's still going to be tough, though.
I also read about how Brandon had to leave the gym where he was coached by James Krause because of that whole gambling fiasco. So I know some fighters might get affected by that in a bad way, but I think Brandon will actually benefit from going to a different gym and learning some different things that will obviously surprise Figueiredo, because he won't be coming in as the same type of fighter doing the same thing over and over.
Yeah. And he was training in a boxing gym in Las Vegas. He'd never done that before, so that should help him too.
Yeah.
So it'll be fun.
And they call him McLovin, or some people do, because he still looks like the guy from Superbad. McLovin. So I always liked that. I always thought that was pretty hilarious. Gilbert Burns versus Neil Magny. That one's a little bit tough to predict, but I like Neil. Gilbert had the tough time against Makhachev, but some people thought he won that fight. And Neil Magny, I think, is he is an underdog. He's not really expected to do as well as I think he'll do, but I think he's probably the livest underdog on this entire card. Don't let the 9 losses fool you.
Yeah, he's certainly not. He's not flashy.
Yeah.
And you tend to forget that he keeps winning so much. But again, I think he's going to have his hands full with Gilbert there too. I think and again, I don't think Magny's the kind of guy that's going to let the be on the road bother him. But Gilbert may have come up short against Kazimov, but in one sense, it raised his stock.
Yeah.
I mean, who'd asked it against that monster for all that time? So I think Gilbert's. Me and you can agree to disagree on that one. Loser does 10 push-ups.
All right. Well, I definitely believe Gilbert has a shot to win, but I mean, he's given up a huge reach advantage, number one, and number two, he's the type to scrap. Like he's going to get in there and take punishment to give punishment in this fight, and even though Neil Magny doesn't have a whole lot of knockouts on his record, he does have the capability to submit people. And when he wins by decision, it's usually unanimous. There's one exception. In 2022, he won a split decision over Max Griffin. But he's won 3 out of his last 4, and the one he lost was by submission to Shavkat Rakhmonov. And I'm pretty sure Gilbert is not a submission specialist. But yeah, Gilbert definitely has a shot. He has the toughness, he has the durability. Like you said, he's home from Rio itself, not just Brazil. So out of his 20 wins, he's got 14 stoppages. That's a 70% finish rate. He's only lost by knockout twice. So we'll see. But he has actually lost 2 out of his last 3. Granted, they were to top-level competitors, Kamzat and Kamaru Usman. But he also beat Stephen Thompson in 2021. He was a very well-rounded fighter. So. And knocked out Demian Maia in the first round back in 2020. That's a pretty big one. So I don't know. Now that I'm looking at it, maybe I should have given him more credit. Yeah, it's gonna be a barn burner. And then don't call me what did they call it? Lauren Murphy. I forget what they called her. It's been so long ago that happened. But Daniel Cormier called her by the wrong name after she had that same experience, like the whole episode or the whole season of The Ultimate Fighter that she was on. A lot of people like to underestimate her, but she's actually done pretty good up until I think it was her last fight. She lost pretty badly, but she was way overmatched in that one. And I think this is a better matchup for her. Obviously, this is somebody who's almost at 10 losses here, 23-9. Jessica Andrade. But yeah, Lauren Murphy, I think, should win this one by decision. She's got 7 out of her 16 wins by decision. 8 knockouts, 1 submission. Only been knocked out herself once in her whole career. 4 decision losses. It was actually the fight before the last one, because she beat Misha Tate last July. After Misha made her comeback. But Valentina Shevchenko was the one I was thinking about, where she kind of got beat up pretty bad. That was her one knockout loss. Lost in the 4th by elbows and punches. And she got really a lot of facial damage in that one. It was kind of tough to watch. But she's beaten some pretty big names leading up to that loss. She's won 6 out of her last 7. Joanne Calderwood, now Joanne Wood. Lilia Shakarova, Roxanne Modafferi before that. Andrea Lee, and Mauro Romero Barella before that. And also had a loss to Sajara Eubanks, who just got booted. She had a tough time with the weight cut, which I do remember from The Ultimate Fighter when she was on there. She had to do like special training at the UFC Fighter Institute, and like they had this whole weight cutting thing there that they put her through, and all the protocol and all that. And that was years ago, and she still hasn't figured out how to cut weight. So she had the issue, and they just booted her right after that. So she's all done with the UFC. And she had a lot of potential coming into the UFC. Like she was looking really good, but she couldn't put it all together eventually. Had to get rid of her. Okay, so next fight, we've got Paul Craig. Again, we just talked about him. Light heavyweight, 16-5-1. He's known for very good jiu-jitsu. Facing Johnny Walker, who's 19-7, and he said he's a different man since he got off the weed. I think he's doing the CBD instead now or something. I don't know. I forget what the story was when we talked about it last time. But yeah, Johnny Walker had some bad fights. He looked horrible, in a couple fights, and then he got back at it. He started winning again. Now, and then the last fight he lost by unanimous decision back in July. Or no, that's Paul Craig. I'm looking at. Okay, Johnny Walker. Okay, he won his last fight. Paul Craig had a 1, 2, 3, 4 fight win streak with a lot of stoppages. Mauricio Rua went the farthest with him. He's also on this card, I think. Went to the second round where Craig actually got a TKO. But he's really good with the triangle choke. That's Paul Craig's specialty. He's got 2 first-round triangle choke submissions going back to 2020. And you can also do the rear naked choke. He did that in the first round against Vinicius Moreira in a 2019 fight. And he's been fighting in the UFC since 2016. He debuted with an armbar submission in the second round. Whereas Johnny Walker is fairly new to the UFC. And he's famous for injuring himself in a celebration once. But he has 15 knockouts out of his 19 wins and 3 submissions. And he has lost by knockout 4 times and once by submission. Yeah, he got his...
You know, you think about that. Johnny Walker was never quite the same after that.
Yeah.
You know, that idiotic... what did he do? Was it a backflip? I can't even remember now.
No, he did one of them soccer
It was
things
some
where he like
celebration
stiffens
and,
up and he just like falls down. I think it's like a soccer. You got it from the soccer celebrations where they just do this weird stuff. In basketball.
Yeah, so he's
might call
blaming
it a
it on
flop.
weed. Maybe he could blame his problem on that.
Yeah.
I mean, because until he got on that losing streak, he was talked about as a serious contender for John Jones because of his height.
Right.
I mean, John Jones has always had trouble against guys his size, and all of a sudden, Johnny Walker was just a crash, man. Well, we'll see.
So
See
in
how he
his
does.
defense,
Who do you like in that one? What do you think?
In his defense, if he's going to win, he usually wins in the first round. His only UFC fight that he won that did not end in the first round was on Dana White's Contender Series that put him on the map. That was a unanimous decision win. He's gotten all knockouts pretty much in the first round for wins. Yeah, every single one. First round knockout. Except for the last one. That was a rear naked choke over Ion Cutelaba. So if he wins, it's going to be quick, it looks like, if you go by patterns. But as I learned last week, patterns don't mean shit.
Yeah, Paul Craig's going to be
I think Paul wins
a
this.
tough out to get out of there quick.
I think Paul wins this because he's just so much more well-rounded. He's such a submission threat. And, you know, the only thing Johnny has on him is really reach, I would think. And I don't know how well that's going to help him. He's lost so many fights, and I think it was.
Well,
like
Paul Craig's
four of his
pretty
last
big
6.
guy too, though.
Yeah.
That'll be interesting.
And he knocked out Jamal Hill in the first round. 1 minute and 59 seconds into the fight. So if you can knock out a knockout artist, that's saying something. So, yeah, I think he wins this one. Before that loss to Volkan last July, he had a draw with Hua, a win against Hua, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 wins strung together around that draw. After that draw. One of them was Hua again. But the last guy before Volkan that he lost to was Alonzo Menefield back in 2019. That was a first round knockout. So, you know, he is capable of losing that way. Johnny likes to win that way. But he hasn't lost that way in a while, so I would go with the Bear Jew. That's one of the funnier nicknames in MMA, I think. The Bear Jew.
Yeah.
And then speaking of Mauricio Hua, he is in a light heavyweight contest. 10th fight of the night. He's 27-13 coming in with 1 draw. Fighting Ihor Potieria. I like Hua in this one. I did not bet on it because I really don't know much about Potiera. I don't even think I've seen him fight. Ihor. I never even heard of a name. Ihor. Ihor. I don't know why.
Well, I hope that he's chosen as a farewell gift to Shogun. Shogun's earned that.
Yeah, you have a feeling, because it's obviously more of a hometown fight for Hua than Potiera comes from the Ukraine. He has a loss in his only contracted UFC fight. He did win in his debut with Dana White's Contender Series September of 2021. And then he hasn't fought since July of 2022. That was a TKO loss in the second round to Nikolai Negumereanu. So I would think Hua probably has the best shot, but you just have to factor in like 13 losses for Hua. He's hit and miss in the later years. He's got 2 losses in a row, the 1 draw to Craig, bookending the last win by split decision against Nogueira, Antonio Rogero Nogueira, who was also pretty ancient as far as experience goes. But Hua's got power. 21 of his 27 wins come by knockout. Only 1 submission, despite being from Brazil, where...
It's amazing how long he's been around.
Yeah.
And he goes back to Pride back in the early to mid 2000s.
Been in the UFC.
I mean, he was a big name back when I was training.
Yeah.
I mean, it's unbelievable the guy's still there and had some wars.
Let's see how good you are at being an MMA Rain Man, Tom. Who did he debut in the UFC against? I'll give you 1 hint. He was a former guest of ours years ago. You might not have been around for that one, but he was a great interview.
Well, I remember his Hua had an upset against Forrest Griffin.
Oh yeah, you're right. I was
not sure if that was his.
I read it wrong. I was thinking it was Mark Coleman. That was his second fight. Mark Coleman was a guest of ours. Forrest Griffin has not been on our show.
Yeah.
That was a rear naked choke loss for Hua, coming off a win against.
Yeah, that was
Pride.
Really surprising. I mean, because that was still in the days when Brazilians, well, they never, after the first couple of years, they didn't have a monopoly on BJJ, but they were still considered. Normally, they had the edge. But hey, as Glover lost his last fight to a Jack, so by submission. So interesting.
Yeah, but you definitely have the feeling this could be a walk-away fight for Hua, especially if he loses badly. I don't think he's going to want to come back and take more punishment if he loses, but I'm pretty sure he wants to get to...
Well, you look at the John Jones fight when Hua lost the title, and then you look at that Dan Henderson fight. Those 2 beatings right there, if he would have retired, I don't think anyone would have been upset about it, but
no.
He's still going.
3 in a row.
Yeah, I guess he was the victim of a bad street crime.
It doesn't always happen with the bigger names, but once you lose 3 in a row in the UFC, if you don't have a huge name, you're usually getting cut if you don't quit. So 3 in a row will be bad news for Hua, especially if he loses at home with a Brazilian guy. We're not going to go through all the analysis on the rest of these, but 9th fight of the night, we got Gregory Rodriguez, 13-4 against Bruno Ferreira, who's 9-0 at middleweight. I don't know a lot about either one of these guys anyway, so I don't even think I bet on that one. Thiago Moises at lightweight, 16-6, fighting Melquizael Costa, who's 19-5 at lightweight. That one, I found out this week. I don't know if it's just because it was early in the week and they didn't have all the stuff posted, but this week, for some reason, as opposed to last week where they had every fight available to bet on, this week they only had the 7th fight on the card and on. So they cut it off at Gabriel Bonfim, who's 13-0 against Munir Lazez, who is 11-2 at welterweight. And on paper, that sounds like a great fight, but I don't think either guy has a lot of UFC experience. And then a big heavyweight one. You know, if you're going to bet on a knockout, you probably should bet on this fight. We'll say that. Shamil Abdurakhimov comes in at 20-7 at heavyweight, fighting Jailton Almeida, who is 17-2. And he has excellent knockout power. Abdurakhimov is like one of those not quite butterbean size heavyweights, but he's got a gut. He's not like super muscular, and if it goes into the second or third round, I think Jailton has great potential to knock him out. But Abdurakhimov, I think, gets most of his wins by knockout in the first round, if I remember from reading his record. Then Luan Lacerda, 12-1 at bantamweight, fighting Cody Stamann, who's 20-5 with one draw. I think Stamann has more UFC experience, so I'm favoring him in that one. And then there's two Bonfims in this fight. They must be brothers, Ismail and Gabriel. Gabriel's undefeated, but Ismail has 3 losses to go with 18 wins at lightweight. And he's fighting Terrence McKinney, who's 13-4 at lightweight. And then Warley Alves, 14-5. I think he's another Brazilian. He's fighting Nicholas Dalby, who's 20-4 with one draw at welterweight. And then we got a female fight. I would have definitely picked this one if it was available, because we got a 9-1 fighter against a 6-4 fighter. And Josiane Nunes, she's 9-1, also Brazilian, by the looks of a Brazilian flag behind her in her profile picture. And she's fighting this Zara Fern dos Santos, who is 6-4 at featherweight. So I would think that Josiane is the clear favorite there. And then Simon Oliveira in the first fight of the night, 18-4 against Daniel Marcos, who was 13-0 at bantamweight. So I think that's about it. I don't have any big news items except for, the whole. I've read up a little bit on this scandal with James Krause. Read a big article today on it, and I hadn't realized that it goes beyond just that. Krause is allegedly, betting on behalf of other fighters, and he made more in betting than he did in his entire UFC career, apparently. Also was acting as an agent for an offshore betting group website, which somebody ratted him out for. But I think it's going to get interesting. What I'm most interested in is, will he be criminally charged for any of this? Which is there's just so much coming out, and you wonder about because I assume he had a pretty big gym. Yeah. And you wonder where those guys, if someone's going to try to regroup somewhere. Wow, I think his best. There's a whole bunch of reverberations. Not to make a pun, but I think his best bet would be to fade into the background, be totally secretive about what he's doing, and make this a full-time gig. Just don't ever let people know you're behind it, because they have these groups where people pay like $1,000 a month to get expert advice on how to bet on fights, and he doesn't just do fights. He does boxing, MMA, and he does other sports. He's gotten very good at it, and he already had a group on Discord, which I'm not that familiar with, but I think it's like a 4chan type of community. And basically, he was doing the same thing that some of these other groups do, where they charge you a monthly fee, and then they do all the bets for you, or they give you tips that you can bet yourself. And he was doing this on behalf of other fighters and making them a lot of money. Which, to me, I mean, it's like, that's like Robin Hood type shit. I think it would make a fabulous story if we fictionalized it, made it kind of based on a true story loosely, and then made it like a movie, where a guy, like, we base it loosely on the UFC, and you could easily come up with a screenplay on the whole concept of, taking all these fighters that are, not making as much as they should on the undercard, not getting the big bonuses, and he already takes 10% as a coach of their purses. So he was seeing a lot of these fighters not making money themselves, and he wasn't making a lot of money just being a coach. So it kind of was a situation that sounds like it came out of necessity. And he owns a ton of properties. He's made a lot of money doing it, and it's on the fringes of legality. That's why it took them so long to catch up with him, because it had to come down to a situation where there was an injury involved, and he knew about it. So one fighter actually said, one of the best quotes I've seen out of any story on this, I read it today. One fighter said, there's insider trading with stocks, and then there's insider trading with fighting, and it's called James Krause. He was very good at what he did, and obviously he knows fighting. He knows styles. He knows how to teach fighting, so obviously he knows something about it. And he did pretty well. I think he actually
Yeah,
won. He won his last fight before he retired a couple of years ago. And
yeah, I mean, he was always had a very analytical approach, a very calm, cool, collected. Sharp guy.
I'm kind of pissed because I think they eliminated the site. They still have the framework up there where we had his interview years ago. It was on another podcasting site we used briefly, and I was amazed because for years and years and years I never paid the bill, and all our posts and all our interviews were still up there. And now I can log in, I can get to the site, I can see some of the interviews, but they don't play, so I think it's a defunct website. But yeah, I remember he had some very insightful comments about, what you need to be as a UFC fighter, how your attitude needs to be, and how the management treats you, and what you have to be willing to put up with. And he was trying to be a little bit of a company man, but at the same time he was giving us like all the reasons why fighters should just be have the right attitude about being in the UFC, basically. He was like, it gives to you, but it also takes away. But we had a pretty good conversation from what I remember. I'm hoping there was an email draft that I put together for a book I was going to write that kind of tied in the Zion situation as well as the fighter pay deal, where he made like one specific comment that I took the time to like transcribe and quote, but I just got to find that somewhere in my email. But yeah, it was one of those things like with Zions, there was one famous quote where somebody said, the UFC isn't a sponsor of, or the Zions isn't a sponsor of the UFC is a sponsor of Zions. Somebody said that to me once, and James said something like that about fighting in the UFC. Not exactly like that, but something along those lines. It was like one of those things that really stood out from that interview. And I would love to talk to him myself. I know he's refused to talk to ESPN, but they're really company people. They're getting all kinds of money from the UFC, so they're going to vilify him no matter what. But I'm kind of an anti-company guy, so he might want to talk to me if it's off the record. That would be great, because I would love to talk to him again and get that scoop. Totally off the record. I can't use any of it to publish, but I can use it for background, basically. love that opportunity. And I could probably still find his contact information from our old interview. Whether it's good still or not, I don't know. I might try to track him down. So there's that. Let's just check our daily Google alerts, see if anything else pops up. Oh, Francis Ngannou. We didn't even talk about that yet. He has rejected a contract with the UFC, so he's officially now a free agent. And not surprisingly, you talk about company guys. Dana White totally dissed him on the way out the door. Said basically that he's afraid to take risks now. That's why he doesn't want to do a new contract. I mean, he wasn't really being unreasonable with what he was asking for going in. He basically wanted a fighter representative with the UFC, which is kind of a foreign concept I've never heard of, but it makes sense the way he described it when he was talking about what his reasons were. He also wanted the opportunity of different sponsorships, which they've denied every fighter. And he wanted the opportunity to box, which the UFC was never going to let him do once they decided to scrap their own boxing thing. Which now I still laugh every time I see somebody with a Zuffa boxing shirt on. Those got to be collector's items now. I don't think they even make them anymore. Because that never happened. Oh, geez, here's a sad story. Jay Briscoe, a wrestling guy, died at 38.
Yeah, head-on car accident. Woman was driving in the wrong lane.
Oh, geez.
I don't know if she was in what.
Another driver also killed. Head-on crash. Daughter's critically injured. Oh, that sucks. Let's see what we got for MMA. But yeah, I do remember before he had to wait out his contract, Tyson Fury wanted to fight Ngannou. I don't know if that fight's still on the table, though. I know they were talking crazy, like they were going to fight with MMA gloves, but it was going to be a boxing match. I doubt that is still on the table, but the chances of a boxing match between Ngannou and one of the big heavyweights is certainly possible. Whether he has a chance to win or not, that's a completely different story. But, with a knee injury that put him on the sidelines for so long, I would think that anything that doesn't involve taking leg kicks would be a better choice for him than jumping right back into MMA. And especially money-wise. I mean, he's going to be such a big draw unless he just loses to a bunch of big fighters in a row. He's going to be a draw. He's going to definitely get butts in the seats. So,
Well, he's going to need a good boxing coach, though, because MMA boxing's a little different.
yes, it is.
Very different.
I mean, you've only got two weapons. There ain't no takedowns, no elbows, no knees, no kicks, no submission holds. I mean, it's. I'm not saying he can't do it. He's got the God-given power, but against someone like even Usyk or Tyson Fury, guys have been doing this all their life.
Right.
It's going to be a rough road for him, I think.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be tough.
But it'll be a good payday if he can get it, because you remember after Tyson Fury's earlier retirement fight against Dylan White, I mean, they were talking about it in the ring then.
Oh, and I'm surprised you haven't brought this story up, Tony. Your boy from Philadelphia just scored the fight of his life on February 25th.
Yeah.
Hank Lundy fighting
I was going to bring it up earlier, then we got distracted.
Adrien Broner. I already commented on one of his posts. I said, don't get fooled by the fake Floyd Mayweather shoulder roll. And I saw him doing some training earlier today with a guy who's just a monster as far as muscle-wise. So.
I saw that. You know what that gym is? It's funny. The guy that is operating this new gym is Danny Davis. And Danny, I met, he used to do a segment in Ring Magazine every month with Bernard Hopkins called Perfect Execution. And they would show like a different technique for training, whether it was like do's and don'ts on hitting the heavy bag, do's and don'ts on working the pads, do's and don'ts on the speed bag, jumping rope, etc. And I met him about 11 years ago at a fight card down in South Philly. A mutual friend introduced us. And we would follow each other on social media, and I happened to bump into him on the Creed 2 set. He was one of Michael B. Jordan's cornermen for the early fight against Andre Ward. And so we always talk back and forth, and he just opened a gym in Abington, Pennsylvania, which is a suburb of Philly, which actually is only about 3 miles from where I grew up. So I'm like, oh man, I mean, as much as I enjoyed my time in South Philly back in the day, I mean, this would have been great because I could actually jog to this gym.
Nice. Yeah, I'm definitely going to reach out to Hank, see if we can get back on the show before this fight. I'm always following his Facebook posts, and I know he kind of briefly retired, kind of was out of the spotlight for a little while, and was thinking about hanging it up, but he's got a lot to fight for right now. A lot to prove, a lot to show that he can still do it, and Broner is the guy that everybody loves to hate. He's kind of a scumbag. He's got all kinds of outside the ring issues. I think he was in trouble for mugging a guy a few years ago. I know he was in court. Like last year, I remember talking about it on the show, how stupid he was acting in court. So, I would love to see him get his ass kicked.
Not the place to act stupid.
No.
Yeah, right.
Definitely
You know, those guys that flip out in court, that's a special kind of crazy.
Yeah.
You know that they're just gone.
I always like watching,
never.
A&E has a show about all these court incidents that go crazy and people that stay
Court cam, yeah.
Oh,
I love that.
It's hilarious. And the best
I hate
ones,
to get started on it though, because I can't shut it off.
Yeah, the best ones I find are the guys that make that sovereign citizen argument. Like, I'm a sovereign citizen. My name is not spelled the way it is on my license, so you can't have jurisdiction over me. Oh, God.
Well, you know, there was one tax protester in federal court, and he's giving the judge a big lecture on the Admiralty flag and, you know, all these amendments are legally ratified. And so the judge says, are you through? And, yeah, I'm through. Good. You want to go to jail today, or do you want to wait 2 weeks? And the guy started, they had to hog tie him.
Yeah.
And then there was another one. I think probably the best was the judge asked the guy if he had anything to say before sentencing, and this is not the time to say anything smart except I'm sorry and I regret. And the guy says, well, if the government would have kept their nose out of our business, I wouldn't be here. We're going to say things, everything else. So I just had about 5-10 years on it. Yeah, it's just
the best incredible. One has to be.
I didn't hear about Broner.
Oh yeah, this was like a year and a half ago. I forget what he was in court for, but I mean, I think it had to do with him owing money. Probably a domestic situation or something like that. Mother of his kids. But yeah, he was like on thin ice, and he was just talking stupid in court. I'll have to look it up, but yeah.
You know what a lot of it is? It's like when you are so, you know, basically screwed, you'll kind of try to do anything. And sometimes if you do like an outburst like that, you might be in the hopes that maybe they're going to say, you know what, maybe he's having like a mental incompetence issue. That's like, you know, a person that might be, you know, definitely dead to rights on a murder trial, right? And they'll try to, you know, act like they're really insane to get like a criminal insanity. I'll tell you, it was the guy that shot up the movie theater in Colorado that time, and you would see him. Then he had his hair like all orange, and he'd always be looking like real spaced out. It was an act. It was all an act, but it's like that was his last ditch effort of, trying to avoid like a sentence like that because he knew that he was going to get nailed.
That never works. That never works. I mean, very seldom.
But it's great. But it's like you're thinking, I ain't got no other choice. So maybe if I can maybe do this to, it's my last ditch effort.
Oh, so it was about money, but I don't think it was a domestic situation. I guess I lied about that. It was probation, and I do remember he said something about money, and he claimed he only had $13 to his name. This is a guy that calls himself be about billions, and so he was flashing all this money around on Instagram, and the judge said, "Where's all the money coming from that you're flashing around? Whose money is that?" I was a female assault victim that he was supposed to pay, so I was right about the domestic situation. He was ordered to pay more than $800,000 to a woman he sexually assaulted in a nightclub back in 2018. And then there was the other case was the guy. I think the guy dropped the charges because he probably got paid off by the promoter, probably. But there was a guy that supposedly was betting with Broner on some bowling. That was one that I definitely remember. And that could have got him in worse trouble because he beat the guy up.
Broner in a bowling alley.
Yeah. I think the story was the guy won all of Broner's money, and Broner went to go confront him in the parking lot and beat him up and took the money. So, it's like...
Well, I wonder if it was a league. I can picture Broner in one of those shirts with all the, sponsors on the shirt. What would his nickname be? They guys have their name on the shirt, bro, or something. I mean,
about bowling, right? Yeah, he got tossed in jail.
That's so un-Broner-like, bowling. I mean, I can't. I don't have a visual of that at all.
He got thrown in jail back in, 2020, over this failure to pay the victim. And then when he went to court, there's actually a video of it here on YouTube. 4-minute video. He's ordered to pay $800,000.
Oh, I didn't have them. I don't have them. I got rich friends. I do. I got rich friends. I got little rich friends that take care.
He's got rich friends that take care of him. I'm not one of them.
It's getting sent to me. I don't have it.
Who's sending you money?
My friends.
They're sending. Why would they send you money?
Because I asked if I need. Listen. I got a big heart. I got a big heart. I'm sure I got a big heart. And when I did have money, and if everybody asked me for money, I gave it to them. And now that they see me that I need help, if I ask,
So tell us who's sending you money.
my friends. I can ask Devontae Davis, Al Heyman. I can ask Steven Espinosa. I ask anybody.
How are they sending you money? These are the kinds of things Mr. Chandler's going to need to know.
They send it through the bank, and it's coming through my account. And I'm
Being
spending it.
directly deposited into your account.
Yes.
Yet none of that information was provided to Mr. Chandler.
I don't know how to do this, but I can show
I
you.
thought you didn't have any financial sources.
You said what?
That's what it says in here.
I don't have no money. I can send money and I spend it. I gotta spend it on bills.
Oh, I see. Okay.
I gotta spend it on bills.
Well, as I said,
I don't
you're
know.
not responding. I think you're not helping yourself right now.
But what I'm saying is this. How do I do all of this? I don't know how to do
Your
this.
lawyer will help you do it.
And how?
Your lawyer will help you do it.
I don't know how to do
That's
it.
why you have a lawyer.
Okay, what I'm saying is this. This is what I'm saying.
Okay, what I'm saying is this. Probably not a good way to talk to a judge. But yeah, she threw him in jail for that. For not paying the judgment and not following court orders. But that's great that his defense is, I got to spend all that money on bills. Well, this $800,000 is a bill now. So you got to treat it that way. But yeah, I'd love to see him get his ass kicked. He was arrested twice since he lost to Manny Pacquiao in January of 2019. So yeah, I'm hoping Hank kicks his ass and I'll win a shitload of money on the bet. Jeez. I don't even know, what shape he's in. Because in this video from 2020, just less than 3 years ago, because that was November 2020, he looks pretty fat. He's pretty out of shape. So I don't know. But Hank, I think, is gonna be hungrier. He's gonna want to make a big showing. He's gonna know the potential for getting an even bigger fight after this if he wins. I think he's gonna have way more incentive. Whereas Broner probably looks at it as a payday. And Hank don't get knocked out either. Hank ain't that type of fighter. Especially not with a guy who fights like a wannabe Floyd Mayweather. I think he's going to get knocked out. So, maybe just one of those bare decisions that it goes to a decision bets would even pay off, regardless of who wins. So, anyway, I guess that's it. Yeah, we're about out of content anyway. Just shooting the shit on Broner. So till next week, thanks for stopping by. And I'll hopefully be a millionaire when we chat again. From all my good bets. Alright, adios.